And we're on Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Bet 37b, near the bottom of the page. So the question is, trokanin. What are trokanin? The question is, it's kind of food, and the question is, what if it's chayav if we have an obligation to take the challah tithe from it or not? Take a little bit of the dough and say a bracha. These trokanin are baked goods made of a watery combination of flour and oil, which are baked in a cavity in the stove, according to the Magen Avraham. Just the halacha l'maaseh. Beforehand, when you're eating trokanin, you say borei minei mazonot, and afterwards you say me'en shalosh, the alamichya. But if you base your meal on the trokanin, if it's kovei suda, then before you say motzi lechem, and afterwards you say the whole berachas hamazon. I'm about to sneeze. You don't care. And trokanin chayivin b'chala. And trokanin, even though it's just a baked goods made of a watery combination of flour and water, it's not actual bread, you still have to take challah from it. Then when Ravin came from the land of Israel to bring the law to Babylonia, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, trokanin p'turim in a challah. He taught the law that actually these trokanin are exempt from taking challah. My trokanin, what are trokanin? Amar Rabaya, kuva da'ara. Trokanin are made of a watery mixture of flour and water, roasted in a cavity in the stove in the ground, and are not actually bread. Amar Rabaya, trita p'tura min challah. Rabaya said trita is exempt from challah. My trita? What does trita mean? Ikad amre gavil marata. Some say the trita is flour and water kneaded that is poured into a boiling hot stove. Ikad amre nahama de hindka. Some say it's bread made from. Some say it's bread from India. Hindka, India. Bread from India. Some explain this name as a reference to a method of baking common in India, according to the Rishash and also the Aruch. Others hold that it was not made as a food of all; it was rather used by women for decorative purposes. The Nahama de Hindka. It was not a food; it was an ornament, a little baked ornament. You bake a little necklace or something like that. Some say trita, which is exempt from challah. What is trita? It's bread made from kutah. Now kutah, it's a very interesting food. It's a Babylonian dish, ancient Babylonian dish. The kutah, or kutah, in Syria is kudha. In Syriac, the word was kudha. It's a typical Babylonian spice made from whey, salt, and bread that fermented to the verge of molding. Yum. Okay, they used to love to make dishes out of slightly moldy bread. Different world. Okay, the spice was extremely sharp to the point where it could be eaten only by the Babylonians who were accustomed to eating in it. I can understand that. In the Mishnah, it's referred to as Babylonian Kutah. It's a spice, again, from whey, salt, and bread, and fermented bread. So, some say trita is bread that's made from this spice called kutah. Rabbi Chia taught that bread made from chukad is exempt from taking challah. But we have a bread that teaches chayav b'challah, that is chayav b'challah. V'hatam k'dibtani tama. There, the reason was taught according to Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Huda Omer, Maaseh mochichin alea asa'an. Rabbi says there's a distinction between types of bread from kutah, and the actions taken in its preparation prove the purpose for which it is made. So, for instance, asa'an ka'avin chayavin. If he made them thick, ka'avin, avin lashon aveh, then they appear like loaves of bread, chayavin, then they're obligated in the challah, and you should but if they're shaped like limudin, then they're exempt. So like, what is limudim? They're like boards. And other people say that it actually means that they're made by novices who don't know how to make, like limudin, like lomdim, people who are learning, people who don't know how to make them, and they're not making them in the right shape. Yeah. So Abaye said to Rav Yosef, Amar Abaye le Rav Yosef, Amar le Abaye le Rav Yosef, Hai kuvadar amay bavarchin ilave. When we're talking about dough, what of the ground, what kind of blessing? What's dough of the ground? Kuvadara. I have no idea. It's like, okay, this is like bread. Amar le misavra namahu. Whoever said it was like bread? Guvla ba'almahu. It's just kneaded dough. It's merely kneaded dough, just like all other cooked grains. Mavarchin ilave borei minei mazonot. Only you say mazonos. Mar zutra kavas sudate ilave varecha ilave hamotzi lechem min haaretz shalosh brachot. Mar zutra, on this kind of dough, he would base a meal on it. He'd say hamotzi, and afterwards he'd say the whole berachas hamazon. Because he based a meal on it, kovei suda, then he considered it to be bread. Amar mar baravashi. Adam yotze behen yidei chovato b'Pesach. My time lechem oni karinen be. Mar baravashi said that with these types of bread, a person fulfills the obligation of deep matzah and Passover. In other words, these kinds of doughs may be made into matzah, and it's kosher matzah. What is the reason? Because we call it the bread of affliction. In that sense, is the category of matzah. This was also called the bread lechem oni, bread of affliction. Mar barav ashi hai duvsha de tamrim mavarchin elave she'akol of the ro. My timer zeh ba'almahu. With regard to Mar barav ashi said over date honey, duvsha de tamre, date honey. One recites the bracha she'akol. What's the reason? That he doesn't say borei priya etz because it's a date. It's coming from a tree. Because date honey, it's not the essence of the fruit, but it's merely moisture that drips out of the ripe fruit. Come on, whose opinion is this? Ki haitana, it's like the Tana who taught the following brayta. Tzanan, dvash tamarim v'yayin tapuchim v'chometz sif vaniot usha'ar meferot shel truma Rabbi Eliezer machayev Koren v'chomesh Rabbi Yehoshua poter. There's a Tana who taught a Mishnah, sorry, not a brayta, but a Mishnah that said, if a non-priest eats date honey, apple wine, or vinegar made from grapes of autumn that grow stunted at the end of the season or unfit for wine production, or any other type of juice made from fruits of truma, Rabbi Eliezer obligates them to repay the principal and the added fifth as a penalty of misuse of consecrated items. Koren v'chomesh, according to Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua exempts them from the chomesh. No, he exempts them at all. Rabbi Yeshua says he doesn't have to pay anything. Why? Because he holds that these are byproducts of the fruit and do not have the status of the fruit itself. Mar Baravashi's ruling with regard to the blessing was based on Rabbi Yeshua's ruling with regard to Truma. Amar lehahu mirabanan lerava. One of the sages said to Rava, Trima mahu. Says, what's the halacha with regard to Trima? Now Rava listened to this sage, and he didn't know what to say. Lo hava adati l'Rava my kamarle. Rava didn't understand what he was saying. Yativ Ravina kamed Rava amarle de shum sheme ka amrat o de kurtume ka amrat o de fortzane ka amrat. Ravina sat before Rava and said to the student who had posed the question about this mysterious trima. He said, are you talking about sesame trima, or are you speaking about safflower trima, or are you speaking about grape pits trima? So, adahachi vahachi. Meanwhile, aske Rava ledate. All of a sudden, Rava understood what the sage was talking about, what this trima was. Chalishata vada ka'amrat. You're talking about pressed items. Chalishata. Ad kartan milta had amar Rav Asi, and you reminded me of a matter that Rav Asi said. He said, "Hai tamre shel truma mutar lasot mehem trima." Those dates of truma, one is permitted to press them in order to make truma, make trima. Dates of truma, you can press them and make trima, because the dates maintain their form. Va'asor lasot mehem shechar, but it's forbidden to make them into date beer. Why? And it is forbidden to damage truma. because when you make date beer, you got to damage the dates, and that's you can't do that in truma. So you're permitted to press them because they maintain their form, and then you're not damaging the truma. But you can't make beer out of them because you got to really whack them and break them. Gemara concludes the halacha is this: Tamre avidnu trima mevarchin ilavayu. Over dates tamre that were made into trima va'avdinhu trima mevarchin ilave borei pri etz. You to say the bracha who creates the fruit of the tree. My taima. What's the reason? Bemiltayu kaime kid meikara. The reason is because they remain in their original state. Now, trima. Why didn't Rava, an Aramaic-speaking Babylonian sage from perhaps the 4th or 5th century, why didn't he understand the word trima? Because trima is a Greek word. He didn't know Greek so much. He knew some words, but he didn't know this particular term in Greek. It's okay. You can be a Talmudic sage and not know everything. So, however, the student was using the Greek word. Trima is a beverage made from roasted grain and crushed fruit. But what he really meant was, but what he understood in terms of the colloquial way that people were using the term was pressed items. So according to halacha, before eating mashed dates, one says borei pri etz, in accordance with the opinions of Rava. Even if the dates are mashed up, you still say borei pri etz. That's halacha l'mas. Shtita, roasted barley. What's the bracha? Rav Amar She'akol Nibro. Rav says, by whose word all things exist. Shmuel Amar Borei Minei Mezonot. And Shmuel said, you say, who creates various kinds of nourishment. Amar Rav Chisda. V'lo pligi. Rav Chisda said, that's not actually a disagreement. Ha ba'ava, ha baraka. When Shmuel was saying you create Borei Minei Mezonos on the roasted barley, the shtita, that's in the case where it's thick. And Rav, when he was saying it, he was talking about when the shtita, the roasted barley, is thin. And when it's thin, you say shakol. Ava lachila avdila. When it's thick, it's made for eating. Raka lirufua avdila. But when it's thin, it's actually just used as a medicine. Therefore, one recites shakol on it. Mesiv Rav Yosef. With regard to the assumption that mixture is essentially medicinal, Rav Yosef raised a challenge from the laws of Shabbat. Wait a second, it doesn't make sense according to the laws of Shabbos. V'shavim, shebochashin et shtut v'shabbat v'shotin zitum hamitzri. And they agree. It says in the laws of Shabbos, he quoted the following teaching. It says, and they agree that one may mix shtita on Shabbat and drink Egyptian beer, Zitom HaMitzri, which contains a mixture of a pungent spice in flour. And if you say it's for healing, if you were to occur to you that it's for healing, refuah b'Shabbat mishari, who permitted healing in Shabbat? So why would you say a shalakol? You say it's for healing. You say shakol. It doesn't make any sense because there's a prohibition of healing on Shabbat. The sages decreed that one may only use medicine on Shabbat in life-threatening circumstances or instances of grave danger. Consequently, they prohibited all curative actions, especially preparing and taking medicine. There's laws about it. When there's certain cases where one can use the medicine, in certain cases one can't. There has to be a serious reason to use the medicine. If the person can be fine without using the medicine, obviously he's not supposed to take the medicine on Shabbos. Okay, Amar le Abaye va'at lo tispura. Abaye said, don't you hold this to be true? V'hatanan, it's taught in the Mishnah. Kol ochlin ochel adam l'refuah b'Shabbat v'kol amashkin shoteh. A person can eat any kind of food for refuah on Shabbos. If it's a food and it's for refuah, he can eat it on Shabbos. And if it's a drink, he can drink it on Shabbos, even if it's for refuah. V'kol amashkin shoteh. Ele ma'it lecha lememar. But what can you say explaining this ruling? Gavra la'achila kamachaven, ha'achinami gavra la'achila kamachaven. The man's intentions with the purpose of eating, and here too, when he mixes the shtita, the roasted barley, to which honey or vinegar was added, he's also doing it for eating. He's not doing it for refuah. So what does it matter? It doesn't matter about refuah because he's doing it for eating. Lishna Charina, another version that was taught. Here's another version of the same teaching. Elamad itlach lememar, gavra lechila kamakavin, rufua mimela kamakavya. Hachi nami lachila kamakavin, rufua mimela kahavya. This version goes like this. Man's intention is the purpose for eating, and the cure comes about on its own. Here too, a man's intention is the purpose of eating, and the cure comes about on its own. Ostensibly, after proving that it is permissible to drink the shtita on Shabbos, it is clearly a type of food over which one requires a blessing. And if so, it's difficult to understand the need for Rav and Shmuel to point out that one is required to recite a blessing over it. But it's actually, the Gemara says in the statement of Rav and Shmuel is necessary. Tzricha de Rav and Shmuel. You gotta say the statement of Rav and Shmuel. You can't just throw it out. You gotta use it. What does it say? If the halacha had been derived solely from the Mishnah that permits drinking shtita on Shabbos, I would have said this applies specifically when one's intention is for the purpose of eating and the cure comes about on its own. But here, since at the outset his intention in eating the shtita is only for the purpose of medicine, just as one recites no blessing when he's ingesting medicine, then he doesn't say a blessing on this at all, the shtita at all. Kamash malan. Let him recite no blessing at all. Therefore, Kamash malan, kevan de'itlach ana'amine baroche. Therefore, it's necessary to teach that if he's eating and he gets some kind of hana from it, because you probably would have thought that if it's refuah, he doesn't say a blessing at all, but he's getting hana from it. So if he's getting hana from it, then we need the teaching of Rav and Shmuel. And what did Rav and Shmuel say? I forgot already. So I'm going to go back and look. Shtitza, Rav says that you say shakol, and Shmuel says that on shtitza and roasted barley you say borei minei mazonos. And now let us continue. Okay. Al hapatu omer hamotzi. We learn from the Mishnah that if somebody eats bread, he says hamotzi lechem haaretz. Everybody knows that. But it's not so simple, as we will see. Tanu Rabbanan mahu omer hamotzi lechem haaretz. The rabbis say, he says hamotzi lechem haaretz, who brings forth the bread from the earth. Rabbi Nechemia omer motzi lechem min haaretz. Rabbi Nechemia says, who brought motzi in the past tense lechem min haaretz, the bread from the earth. Amar Rava b'motzi kuli almelo pligi da'apik mashma. Rava said everyone agrees that when the term motzi, instead of hamotzi but motzi without the hey, it means who brought in the past tense, like we have in a pasuk. It says in the pasuk in Numbers 23, El motziam mimitzrayim, the God who brought them forth from Egypt. Ki pligi b'hamotzi. The difference of opinion is what hamotzi means. What is the exact translation of hamotzi? What is the grammatical form of hamotzi? Motzi brought forth the bread. Hamotzi is a question. Rabbanan Savre, the rabbis say hamotzi apek mashma. The rabbis say that hamotzi means he brought forth in the past tense, like it says in the pasuk in Deuteronomy 8, hamotzi lechamayim mitzorach halamish, who brought forth hamotzi, the water from the dry flint. The Rabbi Nechemia savar, as opposed to the wet flint. The Rabbi Nechemia savar hamotzi the mapek mashma, as opposed to apek. Apek mashma means brought forth, and mapek, according to Rabbi Nechemia, hamotzi is mapek, brings forth, in the present tense. Because we have a pasuk that says hamotzi etchem mitachat sivlo mitzrayim, who is bringing you forth from under the burdens of Egypt, in Exodus 6. Since in this context hamotzi is with regard to an event, hamotzi is in regard to an event that's transpiring in the present. It's unfolding before us. It's happening right now, or possibly even one that will soon transpire in the future. Therefore, it is inappropriate to include this term as a blessing referring to a past event like bread that already has been brought forth from the earth. The Rabbanan, what about the Rabbanan? What about the rabbis? What about Israel? You're sitting around in your bar and drinking and hanging around looking at girls walking in the street and you're taking drugs and you're snorting cocaine and you're not thinking about Israel? Okay. Sorry, I have no idea where that came from. Sorry, that was completely out of left field. And I'm not on drugs here. I was told that I have to speak quicker. I'm going to lose people's attention. Okay, so we're going to slow down a little bit here. V'Rabbanan, Hahu hakika amar lahu kudsha b'richu l'Yisrael kad mapekna l'chul avedna l'chul milta ki hechi diaditu da'anahu da'apeka diadchon mitzrayim u'ktiv idatum ki ani Hashem Elohechem hamotzi. So the rabbi said the following, that the verse comes to mean that the Holy One Blessed Be said to Israel, when I bring you forth, I will perform something for you that you will know, and you'll know when I do this, you're going to know that I'm God, I'm the one, right, who brought you forth from Egypt. It says, and you will know that I'm the Lord, your God, who brought you forth, Hamotzi, from Egypt. So here too the verse refers to the past. It's a difficult grammatical form. So the question is, Hamotzi, is it the present? Like in the verse Exodus 6, where it says, Hamotzi etchem mitachat tzivul Mitzrayim, bringing you forth from the Exodus of Egypt? Or does it have to do with V'yidatem ki ani Hashem Elohechem hamotzi? You will know, and then in the future days, you will know that I am the God who was bringing you, who brought you forth, Hamotzi. So we have a verse here that says Hamotzi means the past. Now I'm totally confused. Mishtabchin le Rabbanan le Rabbi Zera et bar Rav Zvid, Achua de Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Zvid, Adam Gadolhu. They said the son of Rav Zvid and the brother of Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Zvid. They said he was a great man and an expert in brachas. Vaki Berakhot hu. Amar lahem l'kashiyavo liyadchem haviuhu liyadi. So Rabbi Zera said to the sages, when he gets here, bring this bar of Zvid over here, because I hear he's great. I want to meet him. Zim nachada ikla legabe. So one time bar of Zvid, he came before Rabbi Zera, and Rabbi Zera was checking him out a little bit. He said, apeku le rifte. He said, let's have some bread. Yeah, the sages are going to sit down in Babylonia, and we're going to have a feast, and we're going to eat bread, or perhaps a simple meal of simple Talmudic scholars. So they brought out some rifta. Rifta means bread. Petach lamar motzi. So Bar of Zvid, they said the great Bar of Zvid here, they're going to see how he does things, and he puts his hand and says, Baruch Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, motzi lechem min haaretz. He said motzi. They go up, everybody's jumping up and down and rubbing their hands in the air and screaming, how can you say motzi? Amar, Zehu shomrim alav adam gadolhu vaki berachotu. What? This is the great man. He was the big baki in brachas. He says motzi. He doesn't say hamotzi. Bishlama yemar hamotzi ashmeinan taima da ashmeinan dehilchot karabanan. It may, granted, Rabbi Zera said, if he said hamotzi, I'd know that he goes according to the Rabbanan. But what is this motzi business? Ele amar motzi maika mashmalan. What was the reason why Bar of Zvid said motzi instead of hamotzi? He wanted to remove himself from the machloket of whether it's past or whether it's present, and he wanted to show that he's just meaning it's okay, blah 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 blah. The son of Zvid did this in order to preclude himself from taking sides in the dispute. Now, how in the world does this preclude him from taking sides in the dispute? It's clearly he's claiming that it's in the past. I don't know. Anyhow, but as everybody knows, the law is you don't say motzi lechem min haaretz, you say hamotzi lechem min haaretz, and we establish it like the Rabbanan says apek mashma, that it means that we say hamotzi, and we agree that the rabbis who say it's apek, that it also means in the past. So it's okay, because the bread is not coming forth in front of you, transpiring from the earth as you're blessing on it. No, it already happened in a past, before a period of time. Let's say, just according to the halacha, it's interesting that if somebody said, the bracha is hamotzi, right? And the question is the determination of the precise intermediate tense in the Hebrew language. Should motzi be a verb, or is it an adjective, and what is it? The dispute is regarding to how we underscore the perpetual aspect of God's role in the preparation of bread. But according to halacha, the formal blessing is hamotzi, but if he said hamotz, if you just said Berakhot Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam motzi lechem min haaretz, according to the Mishnah Brura, it's okay. He doesn't have to say another bracha. Motzi was good enough. He fulfilled his obligation, and he goes on. B'diavad he did perfectly well according to the Mishnah Brura. It's an Orach Chaim Kuf Samech Zayin Sif Bet. Now we go on. We're not going to talk Al Yerakot Omer. In the Mishnah it says over vegetables one says Borei Pri Adama. Gemara continues. Ketani Yerakot Dum Yedapat. Ma pat she nishtana al yidei or af yerakot nami nishtanu al yidei or. So that is to say that vegetables are similar to bread. From this analogy, one may infer just as bread is a food that's transformed by the fire, so too vegetables are something that is transformed by the fire. Amar Rabnai Mishmei de Abaye. Rabbanai, the sage Rabbanai said in the name of Abaye, Zoto meret shklakot. So that's cooked vegetables, boiled vegetables. You say borei pri adama. Mimai, from where do we derive this? Midikani yerakot dum yedafat, because we compare vegetables to bread. In the Mishnah, Darash Rav Chisda mishum Rabbeinu mane umanu Rav shlakot mevarchin ale borei pri adama. So when Rav Chisda taught in there Rabbeinu, and then the Gemara explains to us Manu, who is he? That's Rav. Okay, in other words, so Rav Chisda is teaching in the name of our rabbi. Who's our rabbi? The Gemara says Rav. It says Shlakot mevarchin ale borei pri adama. Boiled vegetables, you say borei pri adama. V'Rabotenu hayordim me'eretz Israel. And our rabbis who descended from the land of Israel. I mean, there were traveling rabbis who would come and bring the law of land of Israel into Babylonia. And who is this in a reference to? That's Ula. Mishmei de Rabbi Yochanan Amar. So Ula said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Shlachot mevachin aleh shekol nivro. So, according to Rav, on boiled vegetables you say borei pri adama. And according to Ula, on boiled vegetables you say shakol. V'ani omer, and Rav Chisda said, Kol, anything that starts off as borei pri adama, you got a potato, right? And it's borei pri adama, and then you boil it. Well, after you boil it, it becomes she'akol, according to Rav Chisda. Anything that starts off as a she'akol, and you boil it, becomes borei pri adama. Something, in other words, something that's typically eaten raw, not like a potato, like a carrot. A carrot is typically eaten raw. Often eaten raw. So let's say you say borei pri adama on it, and afterwards you cook it. You say a shakol. But any vegetable, according to Rav Chisda, that's originally, when eaten, it's an original uncooked state. One recites by whose word all things came to be, because it's not typically eaten raw. When he boils it, he says borei pri adama. That's Rav Chisda's opinion. Your opinion, however, might be different. Bishlama kol shetchilato shekol nivro shalaku borei pri adama mashkachat la bivracha v'silka bikrava v'silka v'kara. Granted, any vegetable that's eaten in its original uncooked state, one says by whose word all things to be, and then after when he boils it, he says borei pri adama, because you can find several vegetables like cabbage and chard and pumpkin, which are virtually inedible raw, and boiling renders it edible. So when it's an inedible vegetable, some edible vegetable you can't eat raw, like a pumpkin. Then if you didn't cook it, you'd say shakol, because you can't eat it. And then once you cook it and it's edible, you can say borei pri adama. However, ela kol shetchilato borei pri adama shlakol shakol hechi mashkachat la. But however, under what circumstances can you find the case where any vegetable that when eaten in its original uncooked state, one recites borei pri adama, and then when boiling it, you recite by whose word all things came to be, shakol. Right? Because boiling damages the vegetables qualitatively. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak mashkachas la betume v'karte. Says that's the case with garlic and leeks. Darash Rav Nachman mishum Rabbeinu Manu Shmuel. Rav Nachman taught in the name of Rabbeinu, our rabbi, and who is that? That's Shmuel. Shlakot mevarchin alein borei pri adama. One over boiled vegetables, you say, who brings forth the fruit from the ground, who creates the fruit of the ground. And our colleagues who descended from Israel, and that Manu Ula, and that's talking about Ula. But the Rabbi Yochanan's teaching was that on boiled vegetables is a shekel. Vani Omer, Rav Nachman remarked, but this is how I teach the law. B'machlokas shnuya, it's a Tanaitic dispute. Tanya Yatzin Berakik Sharui Vishul Shalom Nimoach Divre Rabbi Meir. Here's the Tanaic dispute. One fulfills the mitzvah of matzah with a wafer soaked in water, or with one that is boiled as long as it did not dissolve. And this is the statement of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yosef Omer Yotzim Berakik Hasharui Aval Lo Bevushal Afal Pi Shelo Nimoach. Rabbi Yossi says one fulfills the mitzvah of matzah with a soaked wafer, but not with one that is boiled, even if it didn't dissolve. Rav Nachman concludes that the dispute with regard to boiled matzah reflects a larger dispute with regard to boiling in general, whether or not it diminishes the flavor. So, just in terms of the halacha, rakik sharui b'Pesach, a soaked wafer on Pesach, one fulfills his obligation after the fact on the eve of Pesach with unleavened bread soaked in water, and that is in the case of an elderly or sick person. Lechatchila you have matzah, but if b'diavad you had rakik sharui b'Pesach, a soaked wafer, as long as it's unleavened, even if it was soaked in water, and I don't care if gebruchs and all of this. That's the law. You can look at Magen Avraham, Rambam, Sefer Zmanim, Hilchot Chametz U'Matzah, Perak Vav, Halacha Vav, the Shulchan Aruch in Taf Samech Yud, Taf Samech Aleph, Sif Dalet, 461, Sif 4. It's all right there. This approach is rejected by the Gemara. Not that that's not the halacha l'maaseh. Now we're going back to the Gemara and we're going to reject the approach of Rav Nachman that was just stated. According to the Gemara, that everyone agrees that on boiled vegetables you said borei pri adama va'ad kan lo kamar Rabbi Yossi hatam ela mishum deva'in tam matzah v'leka. But Rabbi Yossi only said the halacha with regard to the seder, to say that you say that you need the taste of matzah and you don't have the taste of matzah. So according to Rabbi, if it boiled and it didn't dissolve, you'd lose the taste of the matzah. In a boiled matzah, you wouldn't be able to fulfill the mitzvah of Passover, of the mitzvah of matzah, and with a soaked one you would. So the important thing was the taste of matzah. Although there's no obligation to taste a specific unleavened bread flavor on Passover. However, when it's boiled, it's no longer considered the bread of affliction. And as it has the taste of rich unleavened bread, and one can't fulfill his obligation with matzah that has been boiled. So, but here, even Rabbi Yossi agrees that boiling vegetables, not matzah, but vegetables, doesn't damage them qualitatively. So they say that boiled vegetables, you say borei pri adama, but Rabbi Binyamin bar Yefet Amar Rabbi Yochanan Shlakot mevarchin alei shekol nivro. Rabbi Binyamin bar Yefet said in Rabbi Yochanan, you say shekol on boiled vegetables, in contrast to what was just said. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak kava ula le shabeshte Rabbi Binyamin bar Yefet. Commenting on this, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, Ula established his error in accordance with the opinion of Rav Binyamin bar Yefet, who conflicted with the prevailing opinion among the sages in Babylonia. Taheh bar Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera wondered at Ula's approach. V'chima inyan Rabbi Binyamin bar Zefet etzel Rabbi Chia bar Haba. How could you put Rabbi Binyan Bar Yefet in the same discussion with Rabbi Chia Bar Abba? Rabbi Chia Bar Abba, Dayek v'gamir shmaita mi Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi. Rabbi Chia Bar Abba was meticulous in his studies with Rabbi Yochanan, but Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefet, lo diak. Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefet was not meticulous in his studies. And furthermore, Rabbi Chia Bar Abba tlatin yomin mahadar talmudei kamei Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi. Every 30 days, Rabbi Chia Bar Yefet would go do a complete review of everything he'd learned in the past 30 days in front of his master to make sure that it was correct, and Rabbi Yochanan would put his seal of approval on it. But Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefet, lo mahadar, Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefet, with all due respect to him, he wouldn't do this repetition. Va'od bar min den uvar min den. Furthermore, aside from these reasons concerning the difference between a wise and meticulous student like Rabbi Chia Bar Abba and a student like Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefet, who was good but not as good, one can also bring proof from the custom of Rabbi Yochanan, as Dahahu turmasa dishalki le shva zimnin bakadera va'achli le bekinuach suuda atu ishalu le Rabbi Yochanan v'malahu mavarkin ale borei pri hadama. The lupin, give me all the lupins you got. You don't want any money? No, just the lupins. Hamevin Yavin. So, the Rabbi Yochanan taught that the lupin, it's a name of a common to several plants of the legume family, from the Faboideae subfamily. The cultivated lupin, the Lupinus termis, is the yellow lupin, and then the lupin luteus is the most common form of the plant. These plants, which grow to a height of approximately 1 meter, have leaves divided into several leaflets. Their flowers are light blue or yellow with small seeds, 8 millimeters for the yellow lupin and 15 millimeters for the cultivated lupin, and they grow in pods. Due to the presence of certain alkaloids, their natural flavor is bitter. You just had some lupins. Lupins are very bitter if they're not cooked. They are soaked, rinsed, soaked again, rinsed, soaked again, alternatively. It can take 7 times. Only the seeds, alternately, only the seeds are soaked. Even today, boiled lupin seeds are sold as a dessert. It is considered a delicacy in my country. Come, have a little bit of a lupin, Sarah. Though the plant is generally utilized as lupins are usually used for these days, animal feed and fertilizer. Okay, so it's a delicacy in Outer Mongolia. However, in Muncie, you don't have a whole lot of lupins. Okay, anyhow. I mean, in the cultivated world of Outer Mongolia, it's a delicacy. But in the backwoods, backwater, forget it. Anyhow. Lupins. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, what's Rabbi Yochanan's shita with turmacin? Rabbi Yochanan's shita with turmacin is used to say, Bori Pri Adama. After they're boiled several times, then eaten as a dessert. Yes. Furthermore, I saw Rabbi Yochanan who ate a salted olive, and he said a bracha before and after. Granted, if you say that boiled vegetables remain in their original state and that cooking it does not qualitatively damage them, but then initially you say borei prietz and afterwards you say alamichia the main shalosh. Ella, but rather if you say that cooked vegetables do not remain in their original state, then granted, then initially you say she'akol because it's something you can't eat. And then, however, the end, what's the bracha after? So there's several opinions that hold that no blessing is recited after eating something whose initial blessing was she'akol. Perhaps the Gemara rejects this. That's no proof. As perhaps Rabbi Yochanan held that over items which at the start one says shehakol, at the end he says borei nefeshos. Meisiv Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel Yirakot she'adam yoseh behen yidei chovato b'Pesach yotzeh behem uvakelach shelahen aval lo kavushin v'lo shlukin v'lo mevushalin v'yisach edatach b'motayokai shlukin amaylo. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel raised an objection over the ruling that both boiled vegetables and raw vegetables, you said the same bracha. And he raised the objection from a Berakhot concerning the halachot of eating the bitter herbs on Passover. So there's a mitzvah of eating the bitter herbs. So Yerakot, vegetables, which with one may fulfill his obligation, the mitzvah of the bitter herbs on Pesach, one can also fulfill by eating just the stalks of these vegetables. However, one may neither fulfill his obligation with pickled vegetables, nor with boiled vegetables, nor with cooked vegetables. And if it would enter your mind that they remain in the original state, then why are boiled vegetables not fit for using the mitzvah of the bitter herbs? Clearly they don't remain in their original state, so you can't say the bracha over them. Shiny Hasam is different. No, the reason there is not because of changing form and the original state and all of that stuff. Here it's because the bitter herbs, the mitzvah is that you taste the bitter taste of the bitter herbs. Okay, so for that reason, you can't use boiled bitter herbs on Passover. So we're going to continue Bli Neder, Motzi Shabbos, with Daf Lamed Tet, Amud Aleph, Shabbat Shalom from Jerusalem.